Unequivocally, it could mean having my photo evidence every time I jump and put my hand up. I'm saluting to one of the world's wars that was fought in Germany. No, it isn't, but it could be blurred out with special effects that are made from cybernetically inclined folks. And so the same can be said with, well, your network is down because it is not secured. How much of a secure network is a joke, because nothing quite is. But to imitate that with the goal of, well, we need to change into green energy, and so we buy all these microchips and solar panels that would allow for that type of technology, but all the technology is from being made in China. And so when that's put into play, it's a transform of power that isn't honest. It's the same thing that toilets use. You know, you need like a bigger hook if it's gonna be like more accurate, right? And so what kind of a hook would you think would be a hook, line, and sinker in you believing that an agenda of an administration isn't entirely laid out, and so it would be hidden? They say that there's war in Ukraine. We're not going to stop until that gets over with, because Russia could be expanding outside of Ukraine. And so they thought that that is a plan. Well, they're arming all the European coasts with all of our battleships and aircrafts because they think Russia's going to try to take over the world. So with that expense put out in the open, the amount of tactics that are able to be implemented just off a white lie, like, who the hell said that, to not overflow it. And that's the problem with liquidation and seizing assets. Some things are priceless, and for everything else is a sloppy coffee. And that argument can be made with money, just as though you say you have an inside informant and he's plead the fifth, so he can't speak out. But then you've got someone on the other end saying that they've overheard something. And so, like, it's just trying to belittle entropy in quantum mechanics. The problem with a bathtub, seeing how much hot and cold water has been put in it, it can't really be measured that well. But within dynamics of like hard structures on angles, there's a whole line of geometry that everyone looks over because it's too boring. But it's in that geometry that you see these fine-tuned things where they say, Declaration of Independence stated that it is self-evident all men are equal, and so there's no difference in a division of class. But this is going to be where the state cannot have power over the people. So if you're going to go ahead and have a argument that there's going to be built for infrastructure on the international highway systemry, it had racial divisions because it broke down low-income developments to make the interstate more satisfactory to run through, to deliver to the upper class neighborhoods, to be more bountiful from the interstate. And so it's like an anti-racial act that the administration Biden's proclaiming. But then it's the same thing as in the Star Wars, where you've got the Death Star and you've got all these people who are pressing buttons and they're not actually doing anything. Are you going to break down the entire lower income developments and rebuild the highway properly? Of course not. You're just going to score brownie points by belating the labor of just doing some minor fixing, but say it's for the anti-racial act, so you can get all these benefits from a whole bunch of migrations that are gone, sent to these lower income inner city places. We need to fight the war in Ukraine, and they're saying we see all these Ukraine flags out, but none of them are in lower income neighborhoods, because they understand that in order to fight the war in Ukraine, it's because gas prices being jacked. They can't afford that jack. But then, like, with it's just an odd simile that speaks numbers, that Russia's trying to take over the world. Bro, this is the same thing that toilets use to not overflow. And that's the problem with liquidation and seizing assets. Some things are priceless, and for everything else is a sloppy coffee. And that argument can be made with money, just as though you say you have an inside informant and he's plead the fifth, so he can't speak out. But then you've got someone on the other end saying that they've overheard something. And so, like, it's just trying to belittle entropy in quantum mechanics. The problem with a bathtub, seeing how much hot and cold water has been put in it, it can't really be measured that well. But within dynamics of like hard structures on angles, there's a whole line of geometry that everyone looks over because it's too boring. But it's in that geometry that you see these fine-tuned things where they say, we need to fight the war in Ukraine, and they're saying they're not listening to anyone. But then it's where they see all these Ukraine flags out, but none of them are in lower income neighborhoods, because they understand that in order to fight the war in Ukraine, it's because gas prices being jacked. They can't afford that jack. But then, like, with it's just an odd simile that speaks numbers. And as a Christian, I can say it how it is like, the more that you're going for this world power of using the earth at its maximum capacity, the more that you'll be having someone in charge trying to pretend that they're God. The owners of, like, We Energy companies, or dare I say Verizon, this phone companies. And so then they'll all be in a simpatico with thinking that, well, we actually are God. Look how much we're controlling. And so it's the point where God spit people out of his mouth because they weren't good or bad, they were lukewarm. So that's, you can take for rubbish, but when we're made up of 90% water, and the more that we get sick from bad things happening, we sweat it out. This one guy's like, whenever I get sick, I put on a whole bunch of sweaters and lay under covers because I sweat out what's bad. But then also, that's like, God's got his world in his hands, the whole world in his hands. And so then, like, there's that with how Jesus is equal to God, because he was God in an avatar. So all that scalability is equal to, like, Jesus in the flesh. But it's just the ladies who have, like, this clothes hanger meme that they post, and then this jewelry with these clothes hangers with blood in it, is that I couldn't understand it until I just thought earlier that blood is, like, from them trying to fish out their own, because we were, like, to God, we were, like, of his own, because he breathed into dust, to dirt, and that made humans come, Adam and Eve. And so, like, he's able to spit you out of his mouth. But when you've got, like, a female reaching inside of herself to fish out with a clothes hanger her own fetus, and just spearheading that, it doesn't get more white trash than that. All they say, or would have to, is the same as what someone being a defendant, they can say anything and just say, oh, well, I overheard it. And so you can never be charged for perjury just because it's something that you overheard. Similarly, on the attacking point, you could say, we have an insider informant that gave us full disclosure over we heard that same thing. And then now you've got both ends being worse than what it would have been if they weren't called that first.